Hi guys, real quick, I wanted to finish up with chapter 10 in the I don't even want to pronounce that name book before you start your project this week. Most of chapter 10 is kind of we've already kind of hit a little bit about each of the topics before, or you've seen some of the stuff, but it does offer some good explanation on some things. So please make sure you read it. All right, they talk about, the chapter starts with pass by value or pass by reference. When we pass things by value, we pass a copy of the value. So if x equals 5 and then later on a function calls x, what I do is I pass the value of 5 to the function, so that there are now two versions of x and both of them have a value of 5. So call by value just creates copies of the value all throughout your program, which obviously takes up memory space. Pass by reference is totally different. Pass by reference doesn't pass the value, it actually passes the memory location where the value is stored. So if I pass by reference and then I change x to 6, now x is now 6 in every place where x was mentioned, because I went to the actual place, the memory location where 5 was stored, and I changed that 5 to a 6. So now all instances of x are 6. So because pass by reference just passes the memory location, it doesn't create a copy. There's no extra stuff to be created in memory, so obviously it uses less memory. So the rule in Swift is class instances are reference types. They're passed by reference. Functions are reference types. Everything else is a pass by value type. So a structure would be a value type, things like that. So make sure you understand the difference between those two. All right, they also mention the automatic reference counting. So in order to manage memory, Swift uses something called arc. And arc is just a way of saying, hey, every time a value is owned or created, I'm going to add 1 to that. And every time that object is called or claimed, or somebody takes ownership of it, I'm going to add 1. So hey, x equals 5, and then the function takes ownership of it, so now it's 1, that kind of stuff. Well, once the function is done with it and releases ownership, it then goes down by 1. And then once that ownership number becomes 0, the object is destroyed. And that way we don't have a whole bunch of variables out there that we no longer need taking up memory space. Now, years ago, this used to be something that the programmer had to do. He had to make sure that values that were no longer used in his code were killed and things like that, and when they were killed. But now Swift kind of does that automatically for us. All right, moving on. Then they talk about strong versus weak relationships. And they show you, if you look at page 253, they show you like the letter class references mailbox, and the mailbox references letter. So anytime where A references B and B references A, and nothing else has been declared to change that relationship is always a strong relationship. It's a strong reference. So this creates a problem later on when we try to let go of one reference, the other one's referencing the other, so you get this reference cycle, which is kind of like an endless loop. Because one can't let go of the other because they both reference each other. So you can't change one without changing the other. So we have this issue. So and the way to fix that is we use the word weak, and there's an example of this on page 257, and I know this has popped up a few times in your lab, and I don't know if we specifically mentioned why, but now you know why. So making it weak says, hey, I'm referring to that, but if that changes or something, I'm willing to change with it, if that helps. So it avoids that endless loop kind of thing. All right, there's also the keyword lazy, and you'll see this on page 257 and 258. Lazy is used to defer the evaluation of something until it's actually used somewhere in the code. So if you look in your book on page 259, if you ran that code without the word lazy, you'd get an endless loop. But to stop that endless loop, we go to line 87 and we add the keyword lazy, and now that'll actually defer execution until it's actually ready to be called. So make sure you understand lazy. Alright, and then there's not, and or. So remember, anytime we have an exclamation point in front of something, we mean not. So not X or not x is not smaller than 5. All right, then we have and is 2 ampersands. And in order for and to be true, both conditions must be true. So x has to be smaller than 4 and x has to be less than 2 in order for this expression to be true. So if x was 3, the expression would be true. If x was 2, this expression would no longer be true because x is smaller than 4, but x is not greater than 2. All right, with or, only one has to be true. And that pipe command, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you've done it already, is the key right underneath backspace. So with or, only one has to be true in order for the evaluation to be true. All right, then your book mentions overloading. And overloading is just using the same name for a process. So I might have two classes. I might have a class for apples and a class for oranges. And both of those classes might have a value called quantity. But I would have apples.quantity and then oranges.quantity. So that's overloading, using the same name for multiple processes or multiple functions, things like that. All right, and then last but not least, that chapter talks about being a part of the community. Remember, coding is like driving a car. When you first take your driver's test and you pass, you're not ready to, sit home for a year, not ever drive, and then all of a sudden drive down to Florida all on your own, down the highway interstate system. We only get better by driving, and it's the same way with coding. You only get better with coding by coding. So don't be afraid to work on some projects on your own, try to learn new things, and don't worry about posting on forums and looking like a noob. I post on forums all the time, and I will ask sometimes really stupid questions that I look back and later said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I asked that. But that's how you learn. So I put a link there to the Swift forums for you to check out. Also the Swift documentation. There's also a Swift Google group and the Swift Reddit, all there for you. So be a part of the community, be active, and make sure you're working on coding all the time. And it's like you use it or you lose it. So I mean, if you take the summer off or you take a year off, it's a lot harder to come back into. All right, that kind of wraps up Chapter 10. So now we're done with that book. So then this week you're going to work on another project, and then next week you have another project, and then you're all done. So I think this week you make a Doodles app, and then next week you do the address book app, and then you're all done. But again, I could be wrong. So again, guys, if you have any questions about anything, let me know. Otherwise, work on your projects and have a great week.